Hello, everyone. My name is Nikita Madan-Pal, and I am a OED fellow. In this video, we will be giving a brief introduction to the natural language processing project, which involves the sentiment analysis of data from Twitter. I will go into each of the tutorials soon, but first, a brief introduction about natural language processing for those who haven't been exposed to this before. So this is a branch of machine learning that deals with text, or either, so it deals with language, sorry, either in the form of text or audio as well. So a few examples just to let you know about common places where you'll find NLP. So looking at things like autocorrect or predictive text when you're typing or texting, spam detection in your emails, chatbots on various services. That's usually NLP behind it. Search engines make use of NLP, and then for voice language processing, that's things like Siri and Alexa, and obviously all your translation efforts as well make use of natural language processing. And for a brief introduction on sentiment analysis, so this is basically using machine learning or other methods, as we'll show, to try and predict the sentiment of a text. So to say whether that sentiment is negative or positive. You can also have neutral sentiment, but in this project, we just look at this binary classification of either having negative or positive sentiment. Okay, so there are 3 tutorials that make up this project. The first tutorial looks at how to collect the data from Twitter and to clean this data so that it can be used for NLP. So we just do some pre-processing before we can use it. Tutorial 2 looks at performing sentiment analysis using some existing Python libraries, and these use a very different method to machine learning that we'll see. We'll see the way this works and why this may not be as accurate, and why we might need machine learning. So that's how we follow into tutorial 3, where we now look at how we use machine learning for sentiment analysis, both classical machine learning as well as transfer learning. Okay, briefly about the data. The data used for the project is from a data set called Sentiment 140, which contains roughly 1.6 million tweets. These tweets are general, so not on any specific topic, and they all have sentiment labels. So this is a supervised machine learning project where we have labeled data to train the model. The labels are, so like I said, it's a binary classification. So we have either negative or positive sentiment labels corresponding to either 0 or 1. And we're making use of just 2,000 of these tweets so that to limit the training time. You can obviously use more if you'd like. The data set is available here. Okay, so briefly, let's now chat about the hackathon task before I go into tutorial 1. The hackathon task is basically to think of a research question, so some interesting topic where you'd like to collect data from Twitter on this topic, and then use one of the methods shown to perform sentiment analysis. So in the tutorials, your machine learning model will be trained using the labeled data that we've provided, or any labeled data that you can find online. And you then use your trained model and collect new data, so unseen data, and use your trained model to make sentiment predictions for your new data that you've collected. With the sentiment predictions, you can then do some analysis and see what conclusions you can draw, and think of creative ways on how you can present these findings. So there are a number of cool things you can look at. I mentioned here some examples, maybe looking at people's sentiment around the world toward a certain product, or maybe something related to politics. Or, for example, during the pandemic, we did a lot of projects looking at tweets about COVID-19 and how this, varied in different countries and around different topics. So maybe looking at government response or people's use of masks, etc. So those are just some examples, but you can obviously be very creative with this. All the requirements that you would need to run this are in the requirements TXT file, and this is how you can install all of them. If you'd like to clone the repository, this is how you do it. And if you're new to GitHub and haven't done this before, here's some basic instructions on how you can get all of these tutorials and data onto your computer. Okay. So looking at the first tutorial, this is about how to collect data from Twitter and how to clean it. So to collect the data from Twitter, we make use of the Twitter API. Before we can use this API, there's some setup that you'll need to do. And we have this document here, Twitter API version 2 setup, that details how you can do this. So these are the 4 credentials that you'll need to obtain. And you'll need to copy and paste this into the Twitter credentials.py file in tutorial 1, so that you can gain access and authorize the. So basically, it gives you authentication so that you can make use of the API. So there's a step-by-step guide here on how to do this. You'll have to set up a Twitter developer account and then follow these instructions, and you should receive access and these credentials shortly from Twitter. They may send you some follow-up questions, and you may just have to, state that you're a student or someone who's using this for learning purposes as part of a hackathon, and you would like to gain access so that you can look at data or collect data for learning purposes. Okay. They just want to know what you want to do with the data. So just be as clear as you can, and everything should be fine. Okay, so looking back at tutorial 1. All right, so here we have the Twitter credentials.py file I was talking about, where you can paste those 4 credentials and save it. And then we have the the Jupyter notebook on how to collect and process this data, pre-process this data. Okay, so like I said here, you will import these credentials, basically authorize things, authenticate things so that you can gain access to using the API. Okay, so the most important part of this tutorial is actually your search words. You need to be very careful about how you structure your search query. You don't want to be too specific, such that you limit the kind of tweets that you'll receive from your query. But you also don't want to be too general, because then you won't collect tweets that are relevant to your research question. So there are a few helpful tips here on search rules and filtering, if you look at this link. But here you can see an example. We're looking at climate change. So we're making clever use of these and or filters. So we're not being too specific and saying that each tweet must contain all of these words or phrases. We're saying each tweet must contain climate change or any one of these. So you just need to be clever about how you structure this query. Maybe try it, see what kind of tweets you're getting, and if it's what you would expect, and alter your search words if need be. Okay, so we just collect the first, collect about 100 tweets for now, just to make sure that it's working, print them out, etc. All right, everything in these notebooks is very, very well explained, so I'm not going to go into everything. If you read all these explanations carefully, it should be quite clear. Now, one thing I do want to highlight is that I recommend that you don't try and collect more than 1,000 tweets at a time. So you can run a query multiple times, but just don't try and do more than 1,000 each time, because you will be likely be rate limited by Twitter and made to wait until you can collect more tweets. And also you will have to check for any duplication, but there are ways to avoid this as well, so that you don't have you don't collect the same tweet multiple times. All right, so that's how to collect tweets. Now we look at basically cleaning these tweets, removing hyperlinks or other characters, and other things that we need to do in order to perform natural language processing. I won't go through all of them. I will just say that you will not always use all of these methods. It depends on what method you're using for your sentiment analysis. So if you're using a bag of words method versus transfer learning, the method or the kind of cleaning you should do is different in each of those cases. So please be aware of that. And if you read through the tutorials, it will be explained quite clearly. Okay, and this is on how you can refine your search. So you can give it a location with the latitude, longitude, and search radius. And this ensures that you'll get tweets from a certain region in the world. And this is very cool for your project if you want to compare tweets from different countries, etc. But it also has a downfall in that tweets, in order to use this function, tweets will have to have been geotagged. So the user, when they tweeted, would have had to have their location on, and this would have been Twitter would have been able to have had access to this this location. This is, however, so it may limit the amount of tweets that you get back, because obviously not everyone has this when they're tweeting. But it is the only reliable way to get to make sure that the users were at that location, because if you just use the location data from the metadata from each tweet, that is based on the user input location. So it's up to whatever the user put in, and this can obviously be anything, and therefore isn't reliable. So, but if you'd like to try that approach as well, you can do so. Or of course, if you would just like to not put in any location and collect from, anywhere or everywhere, then that's also fine. Also, we can only access tweets with from the last 7 days, unfortunately, with the free version or free tier of the developer accounts. We can only access data from the past 7 days. If you would like to access historical data, then you will need to use a higher tier where it's a paid account. Okay, so that's how to collect tweets. You can specify the certain days, and this is also a way to make sure that you don't get any duplication. So if you keep changing these dates, it will ensure that you don't have duplication every time you run a search query. All right, so here we just show what you should have learned from this tutorial, and that's basically tutorial 1. Let's go now to tutorial 2. Okay, so in tutorial 2, here's our notebook on sentiment analysis using existing libraries. So here we use what's called a lexicon-based method, and that is where each word in a text has been assigned a sentiment score. And so we have lexicons that are available and downloaded, and these libraries make use of them. So this is, and basically in order to arrive at a sentiment for a given text, the score for each word is used, as well as some sort of rules that each of these methods will implement. I won't go too much into it, but basically a rule such as if there was an exclamation mark, then they adjust the score accordingly to increase the sentiments score. And if there was maybe the word not before a word like amazing, then they know to adjust the score accordingly. Those are just some simple examples, but if you read through the explanations here and some of the links included, then this will be very well explained. But yes, so it's using these two libraries called TextBlob and Veda. And then we just compare the results from these two to try and look at which one we think is more accurate, and you can test that. So there's exercises at the end of the tutorial, additional challenges which you can present in your presentation in addition to the task of this hackathon. You can attempt these additional challenges and maybe get a few extra points. All right, so that's tutorial 2. Let's move on now to the machine learning. All right, so tutorial 3 is on how to use machine learning to perform sentiment analysis. Okay, so this is briefly what's covered here. First, we look at using classical machine learning methods to perform sentiment analysis, and then moving on to use methods that are slightly more sophisticated, which is transfer learning, which is, if you'd like to know more about this, it's introduced in this tutorial, or you can Google about it as well. Okay, so this introduces the classical machine learning approach, how we perform the feature extraction from machine learning, and how the method sort of forms a vector representation of each of these texts that you feed into it. So I won't go into this, but it's very well explained here using the bag of words method. All right, and count vectorization to obtain these vector representations, so that basically the computer can understand text. Okay, then you build your own classification model. We have loaded all these models from scikit-learn. If you'd like to read more about each of the models, you can do so at this link, or look at scikit-learn in more detail here. But you can choose which classifier you want to use. So you can try decision tree, or you can change it to support vector machines, or logistic regression, any of these models, and then train your model and see how it performs, and by your confusion matrix, and then go back up, change it, and see how a different model compares, and just play around with that. Here we show you how to make new predictions. So as mentioned in the task, when I spoke about the task, you will use your trained model to then make new predictions on new data that you'll collect from Twitter as part of the task. Unseen data. So this is how to do that and to get your sentiment predictions for your unseen data. All right, and then we go into the transfer learning. All right, so transfer learning, I'll just touch on briefly, but it's very well explained here. But it's a concept where you take a model that has already learned a lot, because language is very nuanced, and it helps to have some foundation for the model on basic rules of language before you train it on a specific data set. So this model that we're using, BERT, so has been trained, you can read more about it, but it's been trained on millions of Wikipedia articles and learned the basics of languages. So that's learned the basics of language and is then fine-tuned. That's the idea of transfer learning. You can look at the paper on BERT here at this link. And we use, currently we're using the Simple Transformers library to help us to make use of the BERT model. If you read carefully here, you'll find out what all these little warnings are. And you can go through and see how this BERT model performs. So the advantage of transfer learning is that because it's already, you're not starting from scratch, the model already has some weights and biases that it's based on what it's learned. It means that you can do much more with much less data. That's basically the big advantage or the strength of using transfer learning. But please do read more about it, and I hope you are impressed by what transfer learning can do. All right, so that's the end of tutorial 3. This lists what you should have learned from this tutorial, and here again we just introduced the task just to remind you. So be creative and think of a new topic, a topic where you could use sentiment analysis to gain some insights into that topic. And there are endless possibilities. So I hope that you enjoy this project. All the best, and thank you very much.